Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. My name is Sarah Wilson from Talent Solutions in Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this session today on the implications of ChatGPT for the graduate industry. This is a Trans-Tasman production today. I'm going to hand over to Lou.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. My name's Lou Zoanetti, and on behalf of Grant and myself, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're meeting on in Australia, and for those lands that our Australian participants are on at the moment, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We'd also like to extend our respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today.
Thank you, Lou and Grant. Together, we make up your presenting team today. Talent Solutions, Brightworks and Prospel have a shared commitment to supporting our community of graduate practitioners. Grant, Lou and myself were having separate conversations about the implications of ChatGPT and decided that if it was a topic of interest for us, there's a good chance that it's a topic of interest for you. And with over 400 registrations for today's event, you haven't proven us wrong. And as graduate practitioners, staying across these types of current topics enables you to really add value to strategic conversations within your organisation, and we're delighted to be able to help you with that. When we were walking through the presentation yesterday, we got to the end and went, hold on a minute, what about some prizes? So it wouldn't be an event from this team without a few goodies, especially with Easter just around the corner. So your conscientiousness will be rewarded with a chance to win some Easter treats at the end of the session. Now, if your name and organisation isn't showing up in your Zoom name, if it's not visible, just click the three dots next to your name to rename yourself so that we can identify you for a prize at the end. So we're going to quickly introduce ourselves and then we'll get stuck in. I'm going to hand over to Lou again.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for your time this morning. My name is Lou Zoanetti. I am the founder and director of Brightworks. Brightworks is an early careers consultancy based here in Australia. We started the business with a focus on end-to-end, all things grad and intern, I should say. And we're very much focused on supporting the industry with their graduate and internship programs. Our work really focuses in on graduate and intern and early careers strategy. A lot of our work is based on the foundations of a program and really helping our clients to nail the purpose of their program and get really specific about the objectives and how their programs will be measured for success. So we support clients to set up grad programs and also review the programs they've already got that may or may not be working. We also support with selection and design and outsourced marketing, attraction and recruitment for grad and internship programs. And our latest offering is in the leadership development space. We have lots of activities that we do in the graduate development space, including workshops, a mentoring program, a wellbeing program, financial literacy, amongst others. So we're really happy to be able to service this industry in an end-to-end fashion. Over to you, Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Lou, and hello, everyone. For those unfamiliar with Prospel, we run job boards and very popular job boards of that, Grad Australia and Prospel New Zealand, across the Trans-Tasman. And as a side note, really excited to be obviously presenting today with Lou and Sarah on what is a very, very hot topic. But back to Prospel. So as I said, we run really popular job boards, as well as we partner with universities, polytechs and TAFEs to run their career directories. So we've got about 50 or so partners across Australia and New Zealand, which includes the likes of TAFE New South Wales, Monash University, UTS, and even we work with some engineering or associations like Engineers Australia. So we support employers. We work with literally hundreds of employers across Australia and New Zealand to build out their brand and help everyone online attract the top talent that are coming through and applying for internships, graduate jobs and part-time positions. So over to you, Sharon.
Thanks, Grant. At Talent Solutions, look, in a nutshell, we just generally describe ourselves as living on planet graduate. We are New Zealand's only research-led early talent consultancy. So we work with our clients to support every aspect of early talent strategy, from attraction, selection process, design. We also have outsourced recruitment services. Research sits in the middle because it underpins everything that we do. We're partnered with the New Zealand Association of Graduate Employers, a sister organisation for those of you in Australia, partnered with the AAGE. And we produce the New Zealand annual industry surveys. Many of you here in New Zealand will access as members. We also have development programs to ensure that once you've attracted and selected all this fantastic talent, you're developing your future leaders effectively. And our technology services, such as our wellness tracker and virtual internship platform, power a range of innovative graduate solutions that sit across all of our streams. So that's a little bit about us and who we represent. I'm going to pass back to Grant for a poll to get us underway.
Thanks, Darren. And this is tech challenge number 1 of the day. So I'm going to try and launch our first poll, which is who in our webinar today has used ChatGPT? So I can see the live results in the background. I'll end the poll in a few moments. But so there's a number of options. Very interesting. Okay, Darren and Luke, can you see the results as well? Awesome.
Yeah, really interesting. Quite a spread.
Yeah.
Not many have never heard of it before, but there are a few.
There is a few. Few have used it frequently, or infrequently, I should say, and frequently. Give everyone another couple of seconds. Those who wandered off quickly to get a coffee and running back to the desk to complete the poll. All right, and I'll share the results. So really interesting. So I've heard about it, but I've never used it myself. It's 41% taking the chocolates to tap into the Easter theme for today. I've heard about it, I've used it a few times just to test it out, 34%. And then it sort of wanes away from there. So yeah, really, really interesting insights actually, and seems like we've got a bit of a spread of everybody on this webinar, which is great to see.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Grant. And I think we can see from those results that, we've got a large number of people who have heard of it and haven't used it, and those who hadn't heard of it before today. So a really good foundation for us to run this session. I think, as you can see on this slide, there's a lot of talk about AI, and it's clearly a hot topic for this year. We can see in this quote, Bill Gates said in an interview with Forbes that AI is going to be as important as the development of the computer and as important as the development of the internet. So it's really clear to see that ChatGPT is worth taking the time to understand and to critically assess the impacts it's going to have on the way we live and work, especially in the graduate industry, of which we're all a part of. So what are we going to cover today? And I think this will give you a really good sense of the flow of today's session. We're going to look at what ChatGPT is and what you can do with it. We're going to talk about the implications for the grad industry and what it can do for your role in HR or talent as a professional. And finally, we're going to cover a little bit about future implications. So let's get started by talking about what ChatGPT is. I wish they'd come up with a name that was a little bit easier to say. In preparing for this presentation, I was constantly stumbling on that word. So maybe someone will come up with a cool nickname pretty soon. So ChatGPT was launched in November last year, and the latest subscription-based model was released in mid-March this year. ChatGPT is owned and developed by an AI research and deployment company called OpenAI. The organisation is based in San Francisco and was founded by some very prominent players, including Elon Musk. ChatGPT is part of a larger family of models known as large language models and is trained on approximately 300 billion words. The model has been carefully guided by human feedback, which is why the responses are so humanistic. Tech giants have been quick to jump on the potential of the technology, Microsoft has already integrated ChatGPT into its search engine Bing, and on the 10th of March announced integration with its own Azure OpenAI service. That means that developers and businesses will now be able to integrate ChatGPT into their own cloud-based apps. So what it means is we're going to see more conversational AI in many more apps and services. In addition, Microsoft will be integrating the new Bing ChatGPT functionality across all its products. The Bing search function will soon be integrated into your Windows taskbar in upcoming updates for those who are on Windows-based computers and tablets. Google has also responded with its own AI-powered Bard, which as of last week has only been released for users to test in the UK and the US. There are some limitations when it comes to ChatGPT. Like all new tech when it's released, there are a few bugs and limitations to the technology. For ChatGPT, the knowledge cutoff base was September in 2021. So that means that it can't provide specific information on recent events or information. So we think this will improve over time, but currently the current model, the knowledge base cutoff was September 2021. ChatGPT is very sensitive to input phrasing, so you really need to ensure that the question that you're asking or the phrase that you're inputting into ChatGPT for response is phrased well. So adjusting your question can even slightly can produce a completely different response. We know that ChatGPT has a biased language model. Because it is a machine learning model, ChatGPT is only as unbiased as the data it's trained on. So if the training data that's being put into ChatGPT contains biased language, ChatGPT will also generate biased responses. ChatGPT has limited creativity, so although it can generate responses that appear creative, it is ultimately limited by the data that it has been trained on, and it may struggle to come up with more novel responses. It has difficulty with long-term memory, so its ability to remember information is limited, and it may struggle to maintain coherence and consistency across longer conversations. And for highly technical content, GPT is known to sound good, but can be factually incorrect. So it's worth remembering that ChatGPT cannot critically think, and you always need to fact check the information that it produces. And we've seen some early glitches with ChatGPT, especially in that first release. You can see on this slide a rather disturbing conversation that New York Times journalist Kevin Roose had with Bing in the middle of last month. So as I mentioned earlier, Bing integrated ChatGPT into its search function. And essentially that integration meant that on the Bing search function system, you were able to have long, open-ended conversations with the chatbot. The tool's code name, whilst in development, was Sydney, which you can see reflected here in Kevin's conversation with Sydney using this conversation thread. And the full transcript of this will be sent through in the references in the slide pack, but we've included some snippets here. You can see that what starts off very well ends with Sydney telling the journalist that he's in an unhappy marriage and that he's not loved by his spouse. And so it descends quite quickly, I would say. And so we ask ourselves, is ChatGPT a force for good or for evil? You don't have to look very far to see a lot of negative conversation about ChatGPT and AI generally. And we as a group don't want to see nightmares about a dystopian robot-like future. We know that the world has been incorporating and reimagining threats and possibilities of tech for decades. Our approach today and generally is to first understand what ChatGPT is and how it works so you can answer any questions that arise on the topic within your organisation. We'll also encourage you to consider the implications and case for change of behaviour to accommodate it, so you can lead those conversations about what changes might be necessary, again, in your organisation. And finally, we'd encourage you to identify opportunities to harness new capabilities to be able to incorporate the benefits of ChatGPT into your work. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Lou. So what can ChatGPT be used for? And this slide honestly doesn't really scratch the surface, but at least it gives you a starting point. It's like a chatbot on steroids. You can generate ideas for your 9-year-old's birthday party. You can copy and paste a swathe of text into it and ask it to pull out key themes. It can write a song or a poem. It can write an essay on the theme of ambition in Macbeth. Describe a black hole using 5th grade language. And I've picked out these examples quite intentionally to give you an indication of the specificity that you can get to with the way that you frame questions in ChatGPT. One of the really fun things about this tool is simply playing with it and seeing the types of angles that you can approach your questions in. But for today, we're really focusing on the graduate industry and what a graduate applying to your job can use ChatGPT for. Now, this list on the slide is certainly not exhaustive, and a lot will depend on your own specific process. But as you'll see, it's certainly long enough to get the cogs turning very quickly as we consider the implications on our selection processes. And I think probably the best way to understand what ChatGPT can do is to see it in action. So we've got a few recordings here to show you some examples, and I thought we'd just start with the classic CV. So I've asked ChatGPT in this recording to provide, and I'm sorry the text is quite small, hopefully you can move it onto a screen that you can see it clearly. I've asked ChatGPT to write a CV, and I've gone with the classic dimensions of a graduate CV. Perhaps they have a few years working in a cafe and a few years working in a retail store. And as you can see from my question, you can be quite specific. ChatGPT not only include some really plausible sounding achievements and activities in these roles, but I've asked it to add in some hobbies for good measure too, and you can see that that's no problem for it either. You know, I think as you review that CV, you'll agree with a few quick tweaks that took a minute to produce, your candidate can really create a solid CV very quickly. So then I thought, well, that's all well and good, but let's see what it does in terms of a cover letter, because we know that many of our graduate processes are still looking for candidates to upload CVs and cover letters. So in this example, I've asked ChatGPT to use the CV that it's just created for me and now create a cover letter to go with it. And this is one of the really interesting dimensions of ChatGPT's capability, is its ability to build on previous information that it's given you, almost like it has a memory. So it's given us a CV, and then it's using the CV information to provide us with what I think you'll agree is a pretty solid cover letter. You know, if this candidate adds in a few sentences about the company they're applying to, they're well on their way to a strong application. I mean, certainly like me, I'm sure you've seen a lot worse cover letters in your time. And the great thing about ChatGPT from a candidate perspective is there'll be no spelling mistakes either. So then let's move to another type of question that a candidate might use ChatGPT for, a sort of classic motivation question. So candidates can use ChatGPT to input the questions that you have in your application form and get a really strong basis to then decide how they might copy and paste that and use it as their own. And you might be looking at this, and I saw a comment in the chat that said, you know, it is quite generic. So then we can get a little bit more specific. So if I then go on to ask ChatGPT to give me a motivation response for a specific company, I've just picked PwC as an example, you can see that ChatGPT can do that as well. And this is the power of ChatGPT, its ability to aggregate information that it has been fed it in terms of across the web, and produce something that's very humanistic in its writing style. Now, I could have asked for a 200 or 350 word response, so you can get very specific with the dimensions of the response you're after. I could have asked it to speak to a particular theme or a particular value of PwC, and you'll see that the quality of writing is very good. So I just wanted to show you a few quick examples, and I think it's great if you have the chance to jump into ChatGPT. It is free to access still. You can register very quickly through the link. If you missed it at the start, it will be in the slide deck for you to have a play. So what are the implications? When we're designing selection processes, we want to make them as robust and fair as possible, hey? We want to level playing fields for our candidates to be able to demonstrate their skills and put their best foot forward. So ChatGPT in this early stage does throw up some challenges for us here and potentially creates some unfair advantage for those that are using it. And you might say, well, look, there's always been a likely percentage of candidates who've got help from some source or another, whether they got help, someone else to write their CV and cover letter or someone else to sit their psych testing. This isn't new. But I guess the difference with ChatGPT is the level of sophistication offered and its availability to everyone. So if we start with CV and cover letters, as an industry, we've been talking about moving away from CV and cover letters for a very long time. And I know that some of you still have leaders in the business who like to have a CV and cover letter, possibly in paper, in front of them when they're meeting a candidate. And will put a lot of weight into how well a cover letter is written to demonstrate that candidate's writing skills. But for those using the cover letter in particular as a proxy for writing skills and or English language comprehension, I just think it's important for you to see how easy it is to generate a strong cover letter through this tool. So you'll want to have this in mind when you're deciding how much weight you'll give to this element of an application and how else you might need to then evaluate a candidate's ability to communicate in written form. And this flows through to your application form design. So again, you'll want to think carefully about the type of question you ask. Motivation questions, as you saw, or even written behavioural questions can be answered by ChatGPT. So when we're designing application forms with our clients now, we're thinking about questions that are not so easily hacked. And we're also weighing up how much emphasis in terms of our weighting we're going to put on those types of responses. We're also going to test them all through ChatGPT to see what kind of response we get. And you may even decide, and Lou and I were discussing this earlier, excuse me, with some of her clients in Australia have decided to remove those types of questions from application forms altogether. Video interview, a well-established step in most graduate recruitment processes. I know many of you will have it in place, and look, we don't expect ChatGPT to affect that very much. In fact, we might see even more use of video interview to replace the evidence points that we've had to remove from our application form process. And when you think about with timed video responses, it is difficult to imagine a candidate using their 30-second response time to review a question in a video interview platform, to pop the question into ChatGPT and trust that the response is one that they want to say immediately. So if your questions require the candidate to give personal examples of situations, that will be even more so the case. So do consider with your videos, consider the amount of time you're giving candidates to review the question so that they don't have time to, I know that there are some videos applications where you give the candidate up to a couple of minutes to think about what response they'll give. You'll probably want to think carefully about the time you give your candidates. And also think about the type of question you're asking. So you might want to also reconsider giving candidates questions up front because they could run that through ChatGPT as well. Onto psych assessment. So they are an important tool to consider, and with long answer questions in particular that we know we need to watch, we also need to pay attention to numerical and verbal reasoning assessments in the classic form. because they are the easiest to run through ChatGPT. And with some deft copying and pasting, we gave this a whirl, you can manage to put questions through ChatGPT and get answers back in time for some of the more classic assessments that are done for classic cognitive, like numerical and verbal reasoning. So it's not necessarily the case you need to stop using these assessments. In fact, the testing providers are obviously across this issue as well. And we've already seen one testing provider remove the ability of candidates to copy and paste into their platform. So do check with your testing provider what they're doing on this front. And if you'd like any suggestions or help with your audit of your testing tools, then please reach out to Lou or myself. I also saw had a comment around gamified assessments, and gamified assessments are obviously a lot harder to use ChatGPT for, so they're a great tool to be using. And also abstract reasoning assessments. So they're the classic shape sequence usually, where you'll get a series of patterns that you then need to decide on what the next one in the series is. ChatGPT currently can't cope with that, with pattern sequences. Watch the space in terms of future developments. But overall, I think it's a good idea to just have a good think about the assessment tools that you're using, do a quick audit and consider what might be able to be hacked through ChatGPT, and just ensure that you're covering yourself on that front with the best choice of tool to get around that. One last thing to mention is that another strategy being used by clients in the interim is to tell candidates that you are going to reassess them later on in the process. So there's essentially the threat of being exposed further down your process to try and prevent candidates from using ChatGPT to answer those types of assessment stages. Just a couple more points for you to think about in this space, because it is a critical implication for the tool. COVID showed us the benefits of virtual assessment centres in terms of cost efficiencies, access and speed. But ChatGPT has thrown a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons in terms of how you assess virtually where candidates have access to ChatGPT. For example, your group activities conducted online or personal assessments that might be based around a case study are all situations where candidates can use ChatGPT to base their responses on. As a result, you might want to think about coming back to some form of in-person assessment. You might also want to just think about how you position your assessments and the type of assessment question you ask to dig a little deeper than what a ChatGPT response will give you. If you're staying with virtual assessment centres, you might also want to consider the use of proctoring. So proctoring is a term that you've probably heard of through university circles. It's a bit like test invigilators. It became necessary through COVID and was used a lot for university exams. So proctoring can involve either a real person who logs on and watches you undertake your assessment. The more sophisticated versions of this enable the proctor to assess the candidate's screen to ensure that tabs like ChatGPT are not opened, or there are AI options as well. So again, reach out to Lou or myself if you'd like to chat more about these options or understand who's offering them. And Lou mentioned previously that ChatGPT has indicated that it's only current up until 2021. Another idea for you is to think about what content that you can use that's very, very recent that may also, for the time being, ensure that candidates can't access ChatGPT for ready answers. So those are some of the key implications that we wanted to share with you that are really top of mind. We would love to keep this conversation going. As the tool develops, there will continue to be implications for us as an industry. And so we're very keen to continue to share ideas and learnings across the industry and within our community. Grant, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. And feel free to, as you're all doing it, pop questions in the in the chat, or it's probably easier to pop questions in the Q&A box so that we can sort of monitor effectively there as well. So feel free to, as we're chatting along, to drop those questions in. So we thought to put some thinking behind how you as a graduate recruiter can use ChatGPT and what you can use it for, because at its core, it's a really, really cool tool, and it's just another tool in the toolbox. So the same as back in the day, a calculator to help you with maths, and now with Grammarly. For those that don't know, I'm typically a terrible speller, but Grammarly has definitely been a life changer for me. And so if you think it through that lens, it could be extremely beneficial, but you kind of need to know, like Sarah and Lou have touched on, how to use it. So we thought to step through some more practical examples that are relevant within the grad recruitment space. So one of the first ones that we deal with a lot here at Prosper is job descriptions. And job descriptions are often the first impression that a student gets into your company. So let's take a step back here and think about a student jumping on a jobs board like Grad Australia or Prosper NZ. They're looking for a accounting graduate position in Wellington or in Sydney, and they start doing that search. And often the first time that they come across your brand will be in that job description. So the reason why I mention that and use that as an example is if I'm an accounting firm and I'm hiring graduates for various roles and various streams within my accounting practice. So let's take tax, audit, and consulting, three quite different streams and job descriptions, as opposed to just copying and pasting the same job description across every single job ad. Why not use ChatGPT to create a tailored job description for each practice area? So you could start off with typing into ChatGPT, or I'm actually going to rephrase ChatGPT. I'm just going to try and use it, the word tool, because it is quite a mouthful as we're sort of learning and going on through this webinar. Within the tool, you could start off by saying something like, write a job description for my firm's tax grad program. Now make it relevant to Australia or to New Zealand. Then you could tailor that down further by saying, make it relevant to the Gen Z audience by removing buzzwords. And I actually did this morning, and it was fascinating. It had about a 3-4 second longer lag time than what it usually does, because it really needs to think through and remove a corporate spiel, which often finds its way into job descriptions. And the reason why I raise that is because we did a webinar on this a month or two ago about Gen Z, and a lot of research has found that Gen Z kind of disengage when they come across marketing spiel or buzzwords. So we want to try and remove that as much as possible from our marketing collateral, and so on. So you kind of get the picture that you can add more and more input to get a better and more tailored output, as opposed to just taking the template and going from there. That's one example. Job advertisements, a very similar thing. You can get ideas from ChatGPT about creative ways to attract eyeballs, whether it be online or on campus. So again, whether it's marketing collateral or whatnot, or where to even put your job ads. Interview questions. If you're starting in your role and you're new to the company and you're not sure where to start, maybe you've got some previous grad recruitment history, but grads is a little bit different. You could ask the tool, what interview questions should I ask candidates for a tax position at our accounting firm in New Zealand, as an example. Social media content. If you're feeling a little bit stuck on how to promote your job on social media, again, you could use the tool to write a post that appeals to the target audience. So whether that be Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. I actually used the tool for a LinkedIn post to promote this webinar, just because I thought it would be fun and interesting exercise to go through. It was very templated to start off with, but that gave me food for thought. And as opposed to just staring at a blank page or a blank screen, I should say, it gave me something to work from. And last but not least, we all love data and insights within our grad community. So we could use the tool to ask it things like, tell me the number of Māori students studying civil engineering in New Zealand, or tell me the number of female tech students studying at Australian universities. Again, really, really cool way of getting data and insights as well. So overall, it's just such a powerful tool, but you just really need to know how to use it. If we jump on to the next slide, awesome. So a question for the audience: what else have you used ChatGPT for? Have you used it for recipes or poems for a loved one? Feel free to pop any answers in the chat. The more creative, the better. Darren, Lou, any inputs from you guys? What have you used it for outside of the grad recruitment space?
I was saying to Grant and Seren, I ran some workshops last week at Monash University and was talking about the application process for students. So we do a lot of work in that student employability space. And I had to reference ChatGPT. I can't go into an environment where we've got students who are all over this tool, and we'll talk about a little bit about that in a minute, but that are all over this tool and pretend not to use it. So my, I have been encouraging of using it in some capacities. It helps with the legitimacy of what I'm saying. I've also been really keen to show other people the tool. I think that there's a lot of power in the tool, but certainly I'm trying to see it as a positive thing and really as a starting point. There's a lot of comments in the chat around the impacts of this and certainly around gendered language. We'll have some time for questions later. But I think if we see this, it's a starting point as rather, which then you would review to ensure that it really represents what you want to say. I'm not sure, Sarah, have you got any examples of where you've used it?
I was just responding to one of the questions actually, but no, I'm embarrassed to say that I've just been using it in Gradland really to test questions, test how good the response would be. We have some of our government clients who would normally do policy questions, and I've been testing ChatGPT to see what kind of responses we get. So no, it's generally been within the work context so far, but I probably, give me some time and I'll keep playing.
But definitely some very creative answers in the chat. I've had a bit of a chuckle at a few of them. Anything from dating tips. So I saw someone rewrote a song in Taylor Swift, with the Taylor Swift lens.
Mini therapist.
Excel, I can definitely resonate with that one.
Translation of languages. Super useful.
Yeah, very cool. You can get a real feel for how you can utilize the tool, both inside these sort of four walls of grad recruitment, but also outside as well. If we drop on to the next slide, Seren.
Yep.
We should actually just print out all those answers. No, and maybe we'll create it as anonymous. So, very entertaining though. So how to get the most out of ChatGPT? So, there's a range of tips and tricks, and you could probably even ask the tool at yourself. But the things that we've observed and learned is be very clear and specific. So essentially, the more specific your question, the better the answer. Although you can build on previous questions and ChatGPT will remember what it has told you previously, try and be as specific as possible because you'll get a far better result. Also, you can consider the viewpoint that will be most useful to you. So, for example, you can use ChatGPT to review things through a particular lens, like a Taylor Swift song. So in our world, you could, as an example, you could review or ask it to review a CV for a graduate position as a grad recruiter. So as opposed to just a recruiter and just a position, you as I said, be specific, but and be quite tailored in the inputs that you're asking it to do. Try and reframe questions in various ways. So this is definitely relevant if you don't get exactly what you are looking for to start off with. And you can get different responses essentially. So you can ask ChatGPT to change the tone of the voice or the style. So you could ask it to write things in either a serious manner or in a funny way. And you can keep requesting iterations until you find the finished product that you're looking for. And last but not least, check accuracy. It's come up once or twice. Remember that data, you touched on this succinctly at the start, that the data sourced by ChatGPT is only up to date up until end of 2021. So be mindful of that. And we all know that a lot of things change in 2 years, whether it's what's going on in the world or policies or whatnot. So just check for accuracy. And look, essentially, ChatGPT, it is on the brink of shaking up almost every aspect in regards to teaching and learning and the learning lifestyle. And it will be on the lips of educators for years to come. It's a very, very hot topic. This was a quote by McCrindle very recently. So I think there's a really awesome opportunity for Lou. I think you mentioned this earlier, for you to be like the go-to person in the office when it comes to all the ins and outs on AI tools like ChatGPT and how it will affect not just grad recruitment, but recruitment in general moving forward. So how it may affect the education sector moving forward. Again, we thought to, very conscious of our target market, and that for everyone on this webinar, and our target market is students, right? And we know that there's a long life cycle in terms of before the student applies for our job and drops that CV and cover letter in our inbox, in terms of how they get there and how they step through the education sector. So, as I said, it's going to be a very, very hot topic for years to come. There's a very broad question at the moment of within the education space and within classrooms: should it be banned or should it be integrated? And there's kind of pros and cons to both. So one of the pros that I thought of is that fast access to information is a really easy one, right? So you've probably already seen this within your own kids or whatnot within the community, that students will literally pick up their phone and they'll say, "Hey Siri, tell me this," or where is this? Where is that? How do I get to X place? So ChatGPT is just the same concept, essentially. It gives you really quick answers. So it could be great for things like homework and assignments and checking the structure of specific things. Some of the cons, and I'm sure there's a few of them rattling through your brain right now. The main one is the accuracy limitations that I touched on earlier. So we know it's not 100% accurate because it's data pulled from the internet, and we know that not everything on the internet is trustworthy. So be very conscious of that as well. But one thing that all educators are kind of agreeing on when we speak with them is that the tool will change the way that assessments are conducted moving forward, and definitely set, at least in the short term. So I think we've got another poll coming up. We do. So I'm going to launch this in a second. All right, you should see that on your screen now. How do you think ChatGPT might impact the future recruitment process? It should be multiple choice. Yeah, it is multiple choice. So feel free to select as many or as few as you'd like. Quite a few people saying I need more time to think about it. Completely fair enough. Especially if you've jumped on this webinar only 44 minutes ago and you'd maybe never heard of the tool or didn't really know the ins and outs of it. So completely understandable. I'll give everyone a few more seconds.
Interesting, some encouraging the use of ChatGPT. So that's the other way to approach it, hey, is to say, okay, it's out there. Let's think about how we integrate it into our selection process. And almost in the same way that a university might have an open book exam, you accept and encourage the use of ChatGPT, but your assessment's then designed to go a step further in terms of critical thinking, to be able to dig a little deeper into that candidate's actual thinking ability. So 15% of you are on that page in terms of encouraging the use of ChatGPT in your assessments.
Yeah, spot on, Seren. 54% need more time to think about it. We've got some analytical, critical thinkers on the call that aren't jumping to conclusions. We can share all these results with you afterwards as well. Cool. I think I'm handing the mic back to you, Seren.
Yes, so just in relation to our prize, we would love to hear one thing that you've taken away from this session today. pop it in the chat box. If you haven't already provided your name and company earlier for us to connect you with your company so we can find you and let you know that you've won your prize. We will be selecting some spot prizes out of that group. So one thing that you've taken away from this session today, and so apologies, I didn't realize that you couldn't change your name once you'd registered because of the webinar style of the session. So yes, please make sure that we can connect you with your organisation when you're adding your comment in. Thank you, and over to Lou.
Yeah, so we've had a great session today, lots of people on the call, and I'm loving seeing all of the commentary. Like, I'm trying to keep up with the chat as we're facilitating this discussion. I think the thing that's coming out for me is there's a lot of unknowns still. Like, it is fairly new technology. We're trying to get across it as quickly as we can and identify the key areas that we need to be aware of when it comes to the industry that we're in and how we can support our organisations to manage this growing change, this growing technology in a really robust way. A lot of people in the chat have identified areas, some flaws with the system, absolutely, some concerns around how this system will help accommodate people who might be neurodiverse or might have a disability or might need more time and be able to have those questions ahead of time. So we're all conscious of that. And the thing I think is really interesting in us doing the research for today is that we're here to support the industry, but we don't have all the answers. And so one of the takeaways from today is we really want to hear from our industry that we're in, is if this topic is really interesting to you, if you want to continue to network and talk about this topic, we'd love to be able to facilitate discussion groups around this because we don't have all the answers and it is going to continue to change and evolve. We do think that, this, someone just mentioned it before, it's a Pandora's box and change is constant. So we think that this type of technology, it's here to stay and it's only going to improve and get more integrated into our lives, into things that we already use. There's been a number of examples people have put in the chat around their kids using Siri and the way we embrace technology is a very simple part of our lives. So we'd encourage you from today to really sit down and think about the implications that this technology is going to have on your organisation, particularly around that assessment process and possibly how you might be able to incorporate that into your organisation, into your recruitment process. And also, as already been highlighted, how can you acknowledge that some people may already be using it and use that as part of your process? Largely speaking, we see ChatGPT as a positive, particularly in its ability to level the playing field for our candidates. And particularly with those, we talk about the have and the have-nots. We've already seen positive outcomes of technology like spell check and Grammarly on people whose first language isn't English, and the ability to use Grammarly to input some written word and get an assessment of that in the context of grammar and spelling and be able to improve their English language skills as a result of that. So really seeing it as something that can help people learn, improve. We're hoping that ChatGPT will have a similar role in leveling that playing field and ensure that grads and students have, improve their efforts to secure work opportunities and accelerate their careers. We would love you to share your ideas and insights as an industry. So if anyone wants to reach out and get in touch with us, we are going to have time for questions. There's already been a number in the chat, but I wanted to acknowledge some people will need to go. So on behalf of Seren Wilson from Talent Solutions, Grant Robson from Prospel and myself, I'd really like to thank you all for coming today, spending the morning investing in your development and learning about this tool, sharing your thoughts and feelings in the chat. And a final reminder, get those comments in so we can get those prizes out to you. We'll be sending out the slides of this presentation as well as the recording. So if you need to depart, feel free to go about and do that and enjoy the rest of your day. And for those that can stay on the line, we're now going to open up to some Q&A. Okie dokie. So we've got 10 questions. Thank you. We've got 10 questions here in the chat. So Grant, Lou, myself in the third person, and Seren, how are you going to tackle these things?
There's some really good questions. I was just looking to see if there were some themes. There they're a little bit different. I think there's a good question that Lisa Olsen's raised in relation to some of the suggestions, particularly around giving questions in advance for that if we were to remove those in reaction to ChatGPT, that then these have been things put in place to support accessibility. So, and I know, Lou, I could see you commenting in terms of questions around how to support neurodiverse candidates if some of the changes that are made start to affect some of the strategies used to support those candidates. And Lou, you've mentioned that we do have some neurodiverse assessments specifically to support those candidates. There are also assessments where you can remove the timed functionality or dimension of psychometric assessment to support neurodiverse candidates. I don't know, Lou, if you had any further thoughts on that.
I think it's just that some people won't be aware that we actually have now a cognitive test that is for neurodiverse candidates. So if you've got someone who identifies as neurodiverse, which we will have, we are seeing larger numbers of people saying that, particularly with this age generation. If they are identifying, we've actually got a separate cognitive test that has been designed by neurodiverse people for neurodiverse people that is a much better assessment for them. There is some research being done at the moment with the University of Sydney, I believe, in the company that created that, to see if that can be used more broadly. But at the moment, it's really targeted towards those students. So if you have neurodiverse candidates and you're not giving them a separate cognitive test, please reach out, because we have got a great tool that you can utilise.
And I think this question's a great one. Are we saying graduates shouldn't be able to use AI to help strengthen their application, but we can use it to help with our jobs? I think it's a really good point, and I don't think that's what we're saying. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Grant?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was responding to a chat in.
Oh, no worries. The question is, are we saying graduates shouldn't be able to use AI essentially when we're using it ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think it depends on how you utilize it as well, because it's a fair point that we're all very passionate within this community about providing equal access and opportunity to all. So it is a level playing field. So I think as long as everyone's got the access to the same tools, then personally I don't see an issue with it. But where there is a little bit of a spanner thrown in the works there is if someone's got access to all the tools, all the knowledge, all the technology, and then there's the haves and the have-nots. If there's someone who unfortunately doesn't have has never heard of ChatGPT before, are they being unfairly left behind purely as a result of that inequitable access, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
so,
I think that's a great point. I agree.
Yeah, so it's a really tricky one. That's a very fluffy answer.
I think that was spot on. You go, Lou.
I was just going to add, I think we just have to be really mindful if there's an assessment component attached to that. So if you look at cover letters and that's part of your process to get to know someone, hopefully they've taken the ChatGPT version and personalised it to themselves. But we can see in the example, it's pretty good, like the base CV or base cover letter that they're coming up with. But for me, I always worry if we're asking someone about a motivational fit question, why do you want to work at Brightworks? What skills would you bring to that role? And someone's answering that with ChatGPT, which, by the way, you cannot check for, because it's not, you can't search for that term like you can with something that's plagiarized on the internet. So it's very hard to assess whether someone's written that themselves, why do you want to work for Brightworks, or has used ChatGPT to construct that response. Now, if you're reading because you want to understand someone's motivational fit, but it's not assessed, that's fine. But if that's an assessed component, which is going to get a score and a rubric of this is 1 and this is 5, then we've got issues, because it's really going to unfairly impact people. And I would argue that then your recruitment process isn't robust. So it's all about fairness and equality and how we measure things as we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Grant said, it will depend a bit on your processes. And it sounds like there's already, the thought process is already out there of how do I incorporate ChatGPT into my process, and almost, as I said earlier, like an open book exam. And like you said, Grant, it's that fair access. So you know that everyone's using it or no one's using it, so that, that no one's disadvantaged. There's another question just quickly on how do you access it from Jose Francisco. So it is free to download at the moment. I don't know how much longer it will be free for. They have launched a subscription service that I'm sure they'll be pushing everyone onto. But for the time being, you can go to OpenAI and try ChatGPT for free. And another question about how protected the information is that you upload onto ChatGPT. And when you subscribe to ChatGPT, it is very clear that you should not put any personal information into the system, into the platform. So it's not promising to keep anything private, and it's quite open about that. It's one of only 2 things that it states at the start when you sign up. Hey. Any other questions that jumped out to you, Lou, in that list?
Just doubling back on one that you just mentioned there, Sarah, or answered live, in terms of is it free or not? And you picked up on this yesterday that, and I've actually been locked out of my desktop. It's just not working any longer for ChatGPT. But then I took your tip and I used my phone and it did work. So again, I'm not too sure, and I'm not using a VPN today. So I'm not too sure what's happening there, or whether they're just trying to migrate everybody onto the paid version, which I think is $20 per month.
Yeah.
That's a fair chunk of change. But so it still seems like it's accessible via mobile browsing devices as opposed to on the laptop.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the other questions will probably best be answered by having a play in this tool itself. In terms of exactly what information it can give. There's a question around, can it provide information on scholarships, grants, etc. Those are all great things to play with the tool and see what it throws up. And particularly if you know the answer, it's a good test to see how accurate the information is that it's giving you as well, keeping in mind that it's not entirely up to date. Although I did see in the chat that someone saw an article to say that ChatGPT was a little bit further ahead than 2021. I don't know whether either of you have read something to that effect. I haven't seen anything like that yet. But
the only thing to consider, and I don't know the answer to that, but also that it's also learning by the inputs that are being put into it. So the example I've seen given is a riddle, and the riddle is Mike's mum has 3 sons. One's named Jason, one's name's Brian. What's the name of the other son? And originally ChatGPT couldn't work out that it was, did I say Mike at the start, Mike's mum? It couldn't work that out, but that's now closed that loop. Because it's machine learning, it's constantly learning from the inputs that are put in. So potentially some things have now gone into the system and it's learning each time someone types something in. So, but I don't actually know that cutoff date. I haven't read anything else other than it was September 2021. So really interesting to see how this kind of develops, particularly with the integration of the tools, Bing being one, but also Microsoft, the whole suite is going to integrate with ChatGPT. So now minutes of meetings, actions, outcomes, like managing your calendar, like that will all become much more AI focused. And, I've seen an example of, I think it's called Copilot, which is the integration of ChatGPT into Outlook and how it writes an email for you. And this is just going to save so much time when we think about how we're structuring it. And ChatGPT is just providing a great solution, which you then can use as a template and go and tweak to make it your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Times ahead.
We are just on time at 2:00. So I have. You'll see in the slide you've got all of our email addresses. I'm very, very happy for you to, and would welcome you reaching out to any of us if you have any further questions. I don't know about you guys. I'm sure you agree. It's so overwhelming to see the level of interaction through the chat on this topic. It's definitely one that's got everyone talking, and I feel like there's a lot of appetite to continue the conversation, so we can put our heads together and think about the best way of doing that as well. But just a huge thank you from me to you both, but also anyone who's left on the call for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, everyone. Great session.
Take care. Ka kite.